Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Kelly Williams, and this is a wrist-friendly, no-flow beginner yoga session. I'm doing this today for anyone and everyone, but also as a thank you for my clients. So this is part of my customer client appreciation video event. So all you will need today is a chair or stool. I'm using a stool today. You could also use a coffee table. You could use a counter. You could use the edge of your bed, anything that will help you with your props, and then also maybe a yoga block or blanket or something for your knees or wrist. Again, this will be very mindful of being wrist friendly, so we can always use our tools and our props to help us out with that today. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to take my blanket and just place it aside for right now, but you are always welcome to use it. Coming into a comfortable seated position, either on your mat, maybe on your chair if that's more comfortable, maybe on something else in your house, you are always welcome to use any prop that feels good for you today. It should always feel good for you. If you're feeling pain, if you're feeling discomfort, you need to stop and come out of it. All right, so let's come into a comfortable seated pose, and we're going to start with a wrist stretch. So I'm going to have you take that right arm up first. You're going to take those left fingers, grab the right fingers, and tuck and pull it back towards your wrist. So this should be a nice, gentle stretch here along the top of the wrist. If that shoulder is creeping up towards that ear to come in this position, I want you to drop that shoulder and try to sit up nice and tall. Maybe engage your abs just a little bit with this one. So holding that gentle stretch, I'm going to go ahead and turn to the side here a little bit so you've got a side angle. I am just tucking those fingers under, sitting up as tall as I can, getting a nice stretch across the top side of the right wrist. Let's take a big breath in. So as we're doing our breath today, make sure that you are breathing not just into the belly, but also into the abdomen, to the entire torso. Good. Let's do one more breath. And we're going to go ahead and switch sides. So right hand comes down, maybe flex that wrist a little bit. We're going to take that left hand out. I'm going to use my right fingers to grab those left fingers and just tuck under just a little bit. If that left shoulder is creeping up towards that ear, let's drop that shoulder. Make sure we're sitting up nice and tall and continue with that nice, easy breathing. Again, a nice gentle stretch here across the top side of that wrist. Let's take a few breaths here together. One more. As we exhale, I'm trying to relax into that stretch just a little bit more. Let's go ahead and switch our hands. So we're going to take those right fingers forward. We're going to take those left fingers, grab the top side of those right fingers and pull it back. So again, we're trying to keep that shoulder down away from the ear as much as possible. Continue with that breathing. Nice gentle stretch here through the fingers, maybe all the way up into the bottom of the arm. Let's go ahead and release that. Maybe do a shoulder roll at this time. Make sure we're staying nice and relaxed. And we're going to take that left hand out, left shoulder down away from the ear. Right fingers come to the top of those left fingers, and we're going to gently pull back. If you find that your elbow's bending here, try to find a nice even point to where you can keep that arm straight, the shoulder down, and those fingers pulled back. It might be that you can't quite get that arm straight and the shoulder down. So bending the elbow is okay here. It's more important that we keep lots of distance here when we get a stretch through this side of the palm versus trying to be perfect shoulder down, out, lengthened as much as possible. And let's go ahead and release that wrist stretch. So I'm going to come back towards the camera. I'm going to have you do little circles with your wrist here. You might hear a little bit of cracking in there. That's okay. Make sure you're always working in a range of motion that is pain-free. That's very important today in our practice. Alternating those arms, twisting. This side's catching a little bit more for me than the other side, so just warming up those wrists. We can do this one again if that feels good. This is your time to kind of take whatever you need with that wrist today. All right, let's take it next into our shoulder stretch. So a lot of what's going on with our wrists sometimes can be related to what's happening to our shoulders. So arms come out, we can have a nice slight bend in those elbows. And we're gonna take that right arm to the front as much as possible. Cross that left elbow over the right, and we're gonna try to wrap those arms as best as we can. So my shoulders and arms are pretty open and my wrists are pretty flexible. So I can get a pretty tight bind here. I can almost get my right hand inside of my left. Now, you may not have the wrist or shoulder ability to do that. So maybe your eagle arm stretch just comes here, right? So just bringing one hand to the back of the other. That's okay. Let me turn here. Whatever arm bind we have for our eagle, we're going to sit up nice and tall with an inhale and gently lift those arms up. We're going to start to feel a pull back here on the shoulders. And if we look down, there's some space between our crossed elbows and our chest. We're going to try to settle our chin into that space and take some breaths here. Now I'm grabbing my fingertips to my thumb with this bind, but if you're here with your hands together, that's okay. Just push them into each other as you lift up and tuck that chin. Let's take a few breaths here. Let's try to slow that one down. One more, guys. Big breath in. And exhale it out. Let's release that arm. Coming back towards the camera. We're going to do the other side. So let's take those arms out. Maybe a stretch, maybe a wrist circle here. Then we're going to bend those elbows so we can take the left one in towards the midline and take the right elbow underneath the left. Trying to take that arm bind as much as we can. Maybe that's here, maybe that's here. Maybe we can get those palms together, does not matter. Whatever bind we have, we're going to lift those arms, starting to feel that pull through here. Tuck the chin into that space between our arms and our chest, and let's breathe here. If your arms are coming out of your bind a little bit, that's okay. As long as we're still getting that stretch back here, we're not straining the wrists. One more, guys. And let's slowly release those arms. All right, all the way out. Let's take a wrist circle or stretch, maybe a shoulder circle. So this is a great way to kind of move into a little bit more movement. Again, this isn't a flow class, meaning we are not transitioning from pose to pose quickly, but that we do want to get a little bit of heat into our joints and our muscles, a little bit of repetitive motions. Let's go the other direction with those circles. Sitting up nice and tall, breathing into those shoulders. And let's extend those shoulders down nice and wide. So if I bring my hands out to the side, no matter where I'm seated, on our chair, maybe on a couch, I'm trying to get those arms out nice and long so my shoulders are down away from those ears. I'm going to plant my right hand onto the mat. I'm going to take my left hand up just enough here to stack my arms. So I've got a gentle bend in my bottom right wrist. I'm not putting a lot of weight onto it. Keeping my arms as is, coming back to center. I'm going to do the same thing over here with my left hand. So a little bit of gentle pressure here on that left wrist. Right arm is trying to stack. Stacking my arms means that my arms are in one straight line from top to bottom. Let's do that again. We're going to come back up to center. We're going to take that right hand down, gentle bend in that wrist, maybe looking up this time, lifting that top left arm. And switch it back to our other side. So left hand down, gentle bend in that wrist, right arm comes up. You can always use your blanket or yoga block or any other prop at this time to kind of pad those wrists if we need them. And coming back to center. So arms come up, we're making Y with our arms. So those shoulders aren't up here by our ears. We're keeping them wide. If you need to bend those arms and bring them more out into cactus arms, that's okay. No matter where we're at, cactus arm, Y, somewhere in between, I want you to work on kind of swaying those wrists. I call it seaweed arms. So we're working on bending one wrist, straightening the other. Now this is a little bit of shoulder work. So this is building some heat in our shoulders while we're getting those wrists to loosen up. Now, if you feel like you don't have the hand coordination here, that's okay. We can go palms in, palms out, palms in, palms out, whatever feels good for you. We can bring those palms in, turn towards the camera, turn them back in, bend them all the way out. Again, feeling some work in the tops of our shoulders, a little bit in our back, but also some warm up in the wrist. Always working in a range of motion that feels comfortable. And now for one of my favorite stretches. Let's take those palms, push them out away, push it all the way down to the mat. So I'm gonna start with my right side. I'm gonna take my hand, curve my fingers, and bring it underneath my sit bones. So I'm gonna gently sit on top of my fingers. Now you can do this on your chair, on your couch, or any other seated prop. I'm gonna sit up really tall. Take my left hand, start to walk those fingers away where I'm leaning. So I'm leaning over to my left, keeping my chin forward, almost dipping my left ear towards my left shoulder. So I'm not doing this, right? I'm not really kind of collapsing into it. I'm keeping my spine nice and tall. I'm just doing a little bit of a lean. This is a stretch all the way down my neck, down my shoulder, and my bicep into my wrist. So you don't want to be lifting up, letting your hand come out. It's going to take away from this stretch. Breathing into it, let's slowly take the chin down towards that left shoulder. So I'm trying to look down at my left fingertips and trying to look down at my left shoulder. If you're really tight in your neck, you may not have this range of motion. You can keep your head here. That's okay. I can feel this all the way down from the back of my right ear to the top of my right wrist. Let's bring your head back to center and we're going to remove that hand. Now let's switch our legs. If we've been seated on the floor or we're sitting anyway like this, let's go ahead and switch our legs. Just switch it up for our sit bones. If you're on a chair or couch or something else, you're more than welcome to stay where you are. And we're gonna do that same thing on the other side. So I'm gonna take my left fingers down underneath my sit bones and I'm gonna sit up nice and tall and walk those right fingers out and away just as much as I can, keeping my arm nice and straight. Now, if you're on a chair and your arm's hanging off, that's perfectly okay. You're just doing a little bit of a lean to the right, not letting that left hip lift up so I can get a stretch from that left ear all the way down to the top of my left wrist. This side is pretty tight for me too. I can feel this from the back side of my ear all the way down the top side of my wrist. Let's start to drop that right ear towards the right shoulder. Now, if you find that you're collapsing into it and your elbow's bending and you're bending here at your abdomen, try to lift back up, extend that arm. I'm trying to get length all the way through here. Let's do one more breath. Bringing that head back to center, let's release that hand and we're gonna come into a down puppy pose using our chair and our prop. So if you would like to use your blanket for your knees here, you are more than welcome to, your yoga blanket. I'm just using a house blanket. You can use anything that you would like. So I'm going to set up my knees on my blanket. I'm going to be facing my chair. Now, this might not be comfortable for some of you. I know being on your knees is not comfortable. Don't worry, we won't be here too long. So I'm going to center my knees underneath my hips, and I'm going to take my hands on the seat of my chair. So if this is your chair, the back would be here, and I'm going to keep my arms long, and I'm going to hinge at my hips, taking my chest down towards the floor. So if you find that you're rolling back and the chair is tipping with you, you're putting too much weight into the back side of the hips. So I want to be able to keep my chest nice and tall here, and I'm really focusing on bending through the front side of my hip. You can see the deep bend is here. a little bit in my knees, but I'm kind of supporting my weight more between my hands and my hips. And this is giving me a nice stretch through my back, underneath the armpits. If this is still too much for your knees, here's a modification for you. We can scoot those knees back, reach those hands forward so that there's more weight forward off of those knees. So find a position that feels good and let's hold. If your chair is too high, you can always grab the legs of your chair and get your torso a little bit lower if this feels good. Whatever prop you're using, find a position where your arms can be as straight as they can. You can get a deep bend in that hip, wherever that is for you. And we're looking to open the chest, open the back. Take some breaths here. 2 more. Inhaling in and exhaling out. 1 more. And exhale it out. To come out of this, we're going to lift up through those hips first, and we're going to come up to standing. So we'll be facing our chair when we do come up to standing. So however you want to come up to that standing position, I'm going to move that blanket right now and face my chair. Okay, so feet are hips distance apart. Hands come onto those hips. I'm going to bring my middle fingers to the front side of my hip crease. I'm going to keep my chin forward. I'm going to come forward into a bent knee forward fold. So I'm really bending. I'm pinching my fingers in this front hip. And I'm going to bring my hands onto the chair for our flat back half lift forward fold. So my knees bend just a little bit so I can get the stretch into the back side of my hips and into my back. If your knees are doing this and they're coming forward past your toes, scoot those feet up so you can get your hands onto the chair and get those hips back into a nice hip hinge position. So wherever your hip hinge is, let's hold and breathe, but let's keep that head up. So the more we have a neutral curve in this low back, the more we're going to get that stretch here on the back side of the hip. So if we're tucking the tailbone and we're tucking our head, this will be taking away from the stretch that we are trying to get on the back side of the body. So let's lift that head, lift that tailbone, keep the weight back in the heels, and let's breathe. If you're not feeling much of a stretch here, you can bring your hands onto your knees. This might be comfortable. Just remember, if we're doing this with our back, rounding and tucking that tailbone, we're not going to get that stretch. So whatever feels good for you guys here. Let's do one more breath. Hands come back onto those hips and we're going to slowly stand up. So we're opening that crease here at the front side of the hips. Now I'm going to have you bring your feet closer together so that your toes are touching. And we're going to do that middle finger to the front side of our hip hinge, but toes and knees together coming down into our chair pose. So hands come together at heart center. If we're not feeling balanced in this pose, because I do have my knees and my toes together, we can bring our hands back onto the chair in our squat pose. That's okay. That's what it's here for. If we are feeling balanced and we have those hands together, let's press into those palms just a little bit to activate them. Just putting a little bit of pressure into those palms. Now your legs are going to be getting warm here. They're going to be feeling some of the work. If you're feeling this in your low back, let's check in with your back. Are your legs straight? Is your chin tucked? Is your tailbone dropping? You want to try to get that tailbone lifted. So if we have trouble holding that, let's bring our hands back onto that chair. Let's take one more big breath here, guys. And standing back up, hands come back onto those hips. We're going to come back down to this chair again. So hinging at our hips, bending through those knees. We still have our toes and our knees pretty close together. Hands come to heart center. We're going to take the right hand to the chair, left hand to the hip. So we're turning to the left here. Now, if this is still too much, you can be a little bit closer to the chair and you can bring that elbow onto the chair if this helps you with that twist. Now we're focusing on twisting here underneath the ribs versus twisting through the knees to get this twist. So this is a very gentle twist here. Let's come back to heart center. Maybe hands come together. Let's make sure the weight's in our heels. And we're gonna take that left arm to the chair, right hand to the right hip, twisting from the ribs, not twisting from the low back or the hips. Gentle twist here. We can have our hands in heart center if this feels good with our twist. Coming back to center, hands on hips, middle fingers in the hip crease. Let's stand all the way back up. All right, guys, let's transition back down to the floor. So we are going to be up and down, but that's what we have our blanket for. So we're going to take 2 steps back, grab that blanket for our knees, come back down to the floor. Hands come back up onto the chair about shoulder distance apart. We're going to do that down puppy pose, more of a hip hinge. So we're bending at the hip, arms are staying nice and tall. And we're going to come into thread the needle. So right hand comes underneath the left and comes down to the mat. Now I've got just a gentle bend in that right wrist. I've got just a little bit of pressure on that wrist. If that's too much, you can always take it up, balance it a little bit more. You can, if you have the shoulder flexibility, you can drop the right elbow so that you're looking underneath that left arm in our thread the needle pose here. Again, twisting, but we're twisting from the torso through here. I'm not twisting through my low back. And if any twisting doesn't feel good, you can always just hold your down puppy pose here and get more of a back opener. One more breath. And let's bring that right hand back to the chair. Maybe reset our back if we need to come up tall, shoulders down. Make sure we've got that curve, that neutral curve in our low back. And we're going to take those hips back, hinging at the hip. Left hand comes down to the mat, gentle bend in that left wrist. My weight is back in my hips here a little bit. If this is feeling good, I can drop that left elbow if I want. I can hover that left arm off the floor if this is a good back shoulder exercise for you. You have a few options here, guys. One more breath. Big breath in and let it back out. All right, let's bring the left hand back up onto our chair. Let's go to our puppy pose. So this down puppy pose, also kind of a mix of our child's pose, is going to be kind of our reset pose today. So you're always welcome to come back into this pose on the chair, whatever's feeling good for you. From here, we're going to open the hinge at the hips. I'm going to bring my left hand here to show you. So I'm going to lift and open that hinge at my hips, and I'm going to come back to standing. So however that transition is for you, I'm going to move that blanket, and I'm going to come back up to the top of my mat so I can use my chair for my prop. And we're going to move into warrior one. So toes facing the chair, hips distance apart. I'm going to take the left leg back first. And I'm going to turn those toes out. So in my practice, I'm lining up my front heel with the middle of the back of the left foot. So I'm centering my front foot in the middle of my back foot. My back toes are turned out to 90, but you can make it a little bit softer and kind of go to more of a 45. Before we do anything else in this pose, what I want you to do is to shift your weight back onto that back foot. Find even weight down through that front foot as we push the front right knee forward to line up over the ankle. Now I don't want to shift all the weight into my front toe. I want to keep it back in the heel. And I'm going to turn my hips and shoulders to the front, extending those arms up for warrior one. Now, if my big toes coming in and my back knees bending, this is going to cause a lot of stress here. So I want to extend through the back leg. At the same time, I'm pushing forward into the front knee, but not pushing into the toe. I'm actually keeping the weight in my heel, hips and shoulders square forward. So ladies and gentlemen, if your knee is here on that back leg, I want you to take a smaller, or I should say a shorter stance so that you can get that back leg straight and that front knee aligned and we're facing forward. Now, low back is still open here, so we don't want to be tucking. We don't want to be overarching our back here. We're going to tighten our abs just a little bit to be nice and tall. Hands can come up. If we're not feeling balanced, we can bring those hands forward onto that chair. Maybe one arm comes up, whatever feels good for you. This is why we have this balance prop today, is to make everything a little bit easier, but to make sure we're doing it right and we're getting all the benefits from it. So warrior one with that right leg forward. Maybe if we start to feel balanced, we can take those arms up. Wherever you're at today in your practice, that is okay. We find that back knee is starting to bend. Let's push back. Hands come on to the hip, middle fingers to that hip crease. We're gonna hinge that torso forward. Maybe the hands come to the chair, either way. And we're gonna step up to the top of our mat. And we're gonna go flat back, half fold. So over that chair, my fingers are pinched in my hip crease here. I can bring my hands onto the chair if that's feeling good, or better on my back for this pose. Take a breath here. Reset those legs. Hands come back onto those hips. We're gonna lift from that flat back fold. And we're gonna take the right foot back for our warrior one on the other side. So again, I'm gonna line my front heel with the middle of my back foot, because that's what feels comfortable and balanced for me. You're always welcome to change your footing if that makes you feel more balanced. I'm gonna sink my weight back into the right toes and the right foot. At the same time, anchoring down through there, pushing my left foot forward, or my left knee forward to line up over my front ankle, squaring my shoulders and hips to the front, maybe onto the chair, but I'm also being mindful to keep my low back open. So again, if I'm finding myself doing this, I'm going to scoot that back foot up a little bit closer so I can get that front knee bend. I don't want to be pushing into the front toes. I want to keep it back in my heels. Arms up nice and tall. Maybe we have them on the chair. Let's do some breathing here. If we have our hands on the chair, make sure we're bending at the hip. If we're straightening into that front leg and rounding through our back, this is taking away from that warrior one pose, all that good stretch and balance work and leg work, I should say, that we're trying to get out of doing this pose. So let's hold for 2 breaths. Taking a nice big breath in and a slow exhale out. If you're finding you feel a little more balanced, you can lift that torso. Make sure we keep that low back nice and neutral. Let's hold for 1 more exhale. Good, guys. Hands come on to those hips. We're gonna hinge at that front left hip. We can bring our hands on the chair if we need, or one on the hip. And we're gonna step up to the top of our mat. Reset, standing tall in our mountain pose, forward fold. Hinging at our hips, maybe bringing those elbows down onto the chair, maybe keeping those hands here if that feels good. Whatever feels good for you guys. Keeping that head and tailbone lifted. Make sure that we're not tucking in and rounding through the back here. From here on our exhale, we're going to transition back down to the mat. So maybe we grab our blanket, bend those knees, bring our hands back up onto the chair. We're going to take it through our cat-cow. So once we find ourselves back down on the mat, let's take those hips back with a hip hinge. Now this is down to our down puppy pose, but here's what I'm going to do to make this into our cat-cow. You're going to lift your head, lift your tailbone. So we're trying to look up at the top of the chair, and then we're going to tuck the chin, drop the tailbone, round through that middle back. On your exhale, so let's do a few more here. Inhale, tailbone up, head up. Sink that chest down, hinge back at your hips. And tuck that chin, breathe it out. Trying to look down at the belly button, round it up. Now, if your chair is too high, you can do this with your hands here on your chair too, maybe on the leg. So coming down, lift the head, lift the tailbone. Tuck the chin, exhale. Round and bring it up. 2 more. Inhale, tailbone up, head up. Maybe we bend our elbows on this pose if this feels better. Again, you can make this whatever feels good. And tuck that chin round. One more. I'm going to bring my hands back on top of my chair. Tailbone up, head bone, tailbone and head up. And tuck and round. Coming back to our head lifted and our hip hinge, let's bring our hands back onto our hips and let's take it back up to standing. So again, transitioning back up, however that transition feels for you. Don't worry, guys, if you're feeling like transitions are a struggle, that's okay. That's something that we also need to work on and develop in our yoga practice. So coming back to standing at the top of our mat in front of our chair. Fingers come to the front side of the hips. We're going to do a hip hinge, a flat back hinge here. Let's take it into our thread the needle twist. So I'm going to have my left hand go to the chair. I'm going to take my right hand underneath, reaching towards the camera. So I'm bending into this left elbow and I'm reaching under. Again, I'm twisting here through my torso with my twist. And then I'm going to take that right arm back out to the side. So I'm not coming up here. I'm keeping my head and back nice and lifted. So reach, bend that elbow, right hand reaches under. Lifting back up, right arm comes straight out to the side. One more time on this side. Bend those knees, keep that tailbone lifted. Right arm comes under. And bring it all the way back out. Hands back onto the chair, onto the hips. Wherever we're at with our flat back half lift, let's stand all the way up. Maybe take those arms up this time. Big breath in. Exhale, forward fold. Flat back. All right, let's take that right elbow down or right hand down to the chair. I'm going to twist. Left hand comes underneath the right. Twisting through the ribs. Bring it all the way back out. Flat back lift with that left hand. And rotate, twist. And bring it back out. One more. And rotate, twist. Left arm under. And extend it all the way back out. Left hand comes back down or to the chair or to the hips. We're going to lift with our flat back lift. Very good. Let's take this into our warrior two. So left foot comes back. We're going to take that warrior stance. So lining up the front heel with the middle of the back foot or any variation of the stance that feels good for you. We're going to anchor back through those left pinky toes. Push forward into that right knee. Make sure we're not pushing into the toe. Hands come out to a T this time. So I'm lining up fingertip to fingertip. My back arm's down or up or vice versa. Let's level them out. I'm still keeping a neutral curve here in my back, but I'm facing the camera. So I am facing out away, but I'm going to look forward over that middle finger. So strong pose here. Relax those shoulders. Let's take a wrist stretch here. Drop those fingertips, lift. Drop those fingertips, lift. Keep up with that breathing. Hold those fingers nice and steady. Coming back to warrior one. So my lower body stays as is. I'm going to rotate my hips and my torso forward. Arms up. Maybe I'm on the chair if that helps me feel a little bit more balanced. And I'm going to take my back foot. I'm going to lift the heel, turn the toes, and step back up to the top of my mat. Coming up to mountain pose, so standing tall. Fingertips come to the front side of that hip. Flat back fold. Inhale, lift up. We're going to take the right foot back. So warrior stance. Lining up the front left heel with the middle of the back foot. Weight stays on that back pinky toe. The knees not collapsing in. I'm going to push forward into that front left knee, keeping the weight in the hip and the heel, not in the toe. I'm going to open up those arms, trying to line my fingertip to fingertip. Keeping a nice neutral curve here, so I'm not leaning forward too much. I'm not leaning back too much with that front leg being straight. I'm bending into that front knee. Keeping a nice even weight distribution down between front and back foot. And gazing over that front middle finger. Let's go back to that wrist stretch. So flex and fold, flex and fold. Let's open your fingers nice and wide here. Flex and fold, flex and fold. Here's 2 and 1. Back to warrior 1. So lower body stays as is. We're just going to rotate through the ribs, arms coming up, maybe onto the chair, whatever feels good for you here in this pose. Make sure we're not backing out of that front knee. We're still keeping that weight over the front knee. We're going to take those back, heels and toes. We're going to lift and turn. Still putting the weight into this heel and hip. We're going to open up this hip hinge, step up to the top of our mat, mountain pose. Arms can come all the way up this time. Hands come back to those hips, flat back fold, bend those knees just a little bit, because remember, we don't want to be doing this in our pose. And lift all the way back up. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's transition back down onto our mat. So you can use whatever transition feels good for you. I am going to grab my blanket and bring it back down to the mat. So we are coming down onto our back, and I'm going to put this blanket rounded just a little bit underneath my low back, so I've got some nice support for my low back. All right, so scooting up close to my chair. You don't have to use the prop. You can always just come down to your back. I'm going to come onto my back, blanket in my low back, and I want to scoot down so that I'm closer to the chair so I can get my feet up on the chair, nice and easy. Depending on how high it is, your feet might be able to go on top. They might be up against the chair, whatever feels good for you today. And we're going to work into a figure 4. So I'm going to take my right ankle in front of my left knee first. My right hand comes to the front side of that right knee. I'm going to gently just push it away. Very gentle, very subtle. I'm looking for a stretch maybe in the inner thigh, the right hamstring, maybe on the outer side of the right hip or glute. This might be gentle, it might be moderate, depending on how tight your hips are. If this feels pretty good and you're not feeling very much, you might be able to lift that left leg up, hug it in. If this is not comfortable on the wrist, you might want to bring that leg back up here and just stay with this push, whatever's feeling good for your hips and glutes and your wrists today. Let's take 2 more slow inhales. So trying to fill everything in the belly and the back. And exhaling it all out. 1 more. Big breath in. And exhale it out. We're going to switch our figure 4. So we're going to release that right foot back to the chair. And we're going to take that left ankle in front of the right knee, starting here, left hand coming to that left knee, and just a gentle push. Again, this should be comfortable on the wrist. It should be comfortable on the knee. If this is feeling pretty mild, we can look at maybe hugging that right knee in. The left hand would go through the figure 4. The right hand would come around. Whatever stretch feels good for you today. If you can't quite get your wrist, to take a bind here, then again, just come back here. Just use that left hand to kind of help manipulate the knee a little bit, but you don't want to be overdoing it, like twisting your whole body here. Again, we're looking for a stretch on the hamstring, inner thigh of that left leg, outer left hip or glute. Wherever's tightest is where you're going to feel it. Let's do our 2 inhales and our 2 exhales. And slowly releasing our figure 4 here. So this is the time, ladies and gentlemen, in this practice where you can take any final stretch that feels good for you. Maybe you want to do some windshield wiper with your knees. Maybe you want to hug one knee in. Maybe you want to hug the other knee in. Maybe you want to do a straight leg stretch here. This might not be easy if your, grip or wrists aren't as flexible. Grabbing the leg may not be as comfortable. Maybe you want to take a gentle spinal twist, taking your knees to one side, twisting to the other. Whatever feels good for you, I want you to take that stretch right now. Maybe it's a happy baby pose, which is where those feet come up and we grab the outer edges of those feet. Maybe it's just an overhead stretch with those arms. And wherever we are, let's come to a final resting pose on our mat, on our back where we're comfortable. So it might be with your knees bent. It might be with your legs up on your chair. Whatever feels good for you. I'm going to start here today for just a little inversion for my legs. I'm going to take those hands up towards the ceiling and I'm going to go back to that wrist bend. So we're bending and we're stretching. Taking whatever feels good. Let's grab those fingertips, do a little stretch back. So fingers coming towards the forehead. And then we're going to fold those fingers down, kind of pulling them down towards the inside of the wrists and palms. Maybe we interlace our fingers, turn those palms, push them up. Get a nice wrist hand stretch here. And then let's do the same with the other direction. So we're going to turn those palms so they're facing us, and we're going to push those wrists up towards the ceiling. So I'm kind of almost bringing my thumbs together, pushing them up here. Let's release the bind of our fingers and let's just come down into a final comfortable resting pose. So maybe it's here, maybe I want to bring my legs back down, maybe I want to stretch out all the way straight on your mat, whatever feels good. I'm liking this inversion for my legs today. So let's just take a few minutes here to do kind of a mind-body scan. Take a few inhales, take a few exhales. I want you to check in with how your wrist is feeling, your neck, your back, your legs, your arms. Just check in with how you're feeling. If your mind keeps trying to wander away to what you're doing next after this video, try not to think about that. Try to just be here and be present with your breath. We'll just be here for a minute or so. If you've closed your eyes, let's open them back up. If you have your legs elevated like mine, slowly bend those knees and bring them back down to the mat. Ladies and gentlemen, we are done. We are closing out today. So take your time coming back up to seated. Maybe a little stretch overhead. Both of my shoulders just popped. So definitely feeling some of the work on the stretch in my shoulders today. Let's come back to a comfortable seated pose, or you can choose to stay laying on your mat, whatever feels comfortable for you today. I want to thank you all so much for joining me today and letting me be your guide. Thank you so much. Come back to my channel. I'll be doing a lot more of these videos to come. If you have any suggestions or comments, feel free to drop them below. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you so much. Namaste.